Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Stacie Shifflett to the show. And I'm excited to dive in to her work around modern consciousness and all the work she's doing in the world as well. So just a quick introduction to Stacie. So Stacie is the founder of Modern Consciousness and the author of Treasure Map to Joy. She helps people build self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and clarity so that they can make more conscious, confidence-building choices in their lives. So Stacie, welcome to the show today. Glad to have you on.
Thanks, Johnny. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you on. So, Stacie, I'd love to first of all hear, what is modern consciousness?
Oh, gosh. It is, at its simplest, it is living consciously in the modern world. And that means staying balanced and centered and intentional and joyful and at peace in your heart, despite all of the craziness going on around us, That's really what it means, and it's something that I practice.
Wow. And how did you first get into this?
Well, I got into this. I did a very deep dive into personal development when my 28-year marriage imploded. Yeah, I learned a lot about myself, but I learned a lot about the human condition, and that's was really, I'm a geek. I'm kind of an analyst at heart. So when I started all of this personal development work, I really was looking for answers for myself, of course, but really trying to understand the human condition overall, just because I'm kind of nerdy and wired that way. And through that process, the idea for this company and the aspects of modern consciousness and everything just started coming in through me with meditation. And I resisted it for a couple of years. I was like, modern consciousness, this is cool. And I'm capturing all this interesting stuff. And I'm like, where are all these thoughts coming from? And, yeah, I just kept resisting it and saying, no, I don't think I want to start another company. I'm not your girl. I'm not your girl. And it wouldn't leave me alone. So I surrendered to it. And here I am.
Oh, wow. I love that. And no, it sounds like meditation was a bit of a struggle for you originally.
It's, it is, meditation is not what we necessarily think it to be, right? I spend a lot of time being quiet. And, we often think, we look at the big gurus and, what have you. It's not, for me, it's not that. It's really being quiet. And it was such an interesting experience when I first started and learning how to quiet your mind and quiet your thoughts. And then, I remember being able to move the energy around my body, right? I don't know if you've ever experienced that. When you think about your foot, you feel the energy in your foot. If you think about your left shoulder, you can feel the energy in your left shoulder. So it was really a very, very interesting experience for me and a lot of fun. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. Yeah. For me, meditation was a challenge to begin with. It's okay, I'm feeling it here, but I'm distracted, all these kind of things. But
yeah, I learned to not distract, but we're humans. So our minds are always going and the thoughts are always coming. And often what I do now is I just will set an intention, I'll set aside some quiet time and I'll get in a comfortable position and, I will kind of set an intention and then I just really focus on my breath or I just repeat, oh, I am to myself as I'm breathing. And it's really interesting the response that you will get to your intention. It doesn't generally come to me at that moment, but it could be 3 hours later and I go, aha, I've got my answer. So that's how I treat it and how I practice it these days.
I love that. Just being with it. Just being with it.
Just being. It's, we don't hear the little voice within us. We can't hear our intuition. We can't really gauge our, I know you talk a lot about mental health and so on in your program here. We can't really gauge those things unless we find quiet and to have those conversations with ourselves. Because with all the noise, we can't really have that conversation,
So just finding silence, time for silence.
I love quiet, yes.
Love that. So I'd love to know, Stacie, about Treasure Map to Joy and what's that book about? Love to hear a little bit more.
Yes, it's a parable. I released it last August. It's one woman's journey from disruption to joy, and it's a teaching story. The themes of the book obviously are centered around joy, but just we all experience disruptions in our lives. I experienced divorce. I lost my first son many, many decades ago at this point. But really, to me, joy is a journey and we're responsible for our joy. It really is an inner state and it's one that is not necessarily granted by circumstances or necessarily something that happens to us. I think that we can rediscover it, we can reset it, we can cultivate it from within. And it's not necessarily, as I said, something we achieve, it's something we allow. We can allow ourselves to feel joy. And so often we don't. We postpone it or we're worried, we're concerned about things. We're busy. I'll celebrate, when this is done, I'll be happy and celebrate. But those moments are fleeting. So I like to think of joy as a constant state and something that is foundational and sustains us through everything, even things that are quite unpleasant, right? We all have unpleasant situations in life.
Sure. Okay, so joy is something we can, let me get you correct, but it's like something we can access now.
Yes, always. Yes. Yeah.
I guess like someone going through like a really hard time right now, they're like, how do I access joy when I'm going through these tough challenges? Like, what guidance would you give to them?
I think we find moments to allow ourselves to feel some joy. I can give you some personal examples. My home flooded with hurricanes in Florida in 2024, and I was displaced from my home for 9 months as repairs were underway. So, you know, I had just finished a major repair and I had just finished laying new flooring on the first floor, right? So then my house flooded. So this is like, it was not fun, I can tell you, but even with the irritation and the disruption, and I leaned into gratitude. So, and this is an honest story right now. I am grateful that I had the money to repair the homes, right? So I had the means to do that without waiting for insurance payments and whatnot and let all of that stuff settle. But I was like, okay, had I not had this major repair, I wouldn't have met the wonderful contractor that I trusted. He wouldn't have been in my home. So I had first access to him, right? Because he was finishing up a job. So I had immediate access. I had immediate help to someone that I had been working with for months already that I trusted, and I just leaned into that. A lot of my furniture had been moved. Now my home only got a couple of inches of water in it. A lot of people fared a lot worse, so I leaned into that. My house didn't slide off the mountain like it did in North Carolina with Hurricane Helene. So even though it was disastrous, and it was, I leaned into gratitude for the things that I could, and that held me up instead of complaining about everything, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Was gratitude something you practiced before this happened, or?
It's been a long journey for me since my divorce. I can't say that I was
Sure.
particularly grateful when that
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, understandable. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very tough decision for me to make, but it was the right decision, and sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to do. And it took me quite a while to recover from that, but through the journey of recovering from that and digging deeply into learning and, reading books, and I traveled with Tony Robbins as a platinum partner for 2 years, and I've studied with a lot of
Oh, wow.
different people. I learned a lot, and I intentionally applied what I was learning to my knowledge, or the knowledge that I was learning to myself, to embody it. And so often what I find is missing, we learn things, sorry, we accumulate knowledge, but we don't quite know what to do with it, right? We don't know how to take that and transform it into a practical application in our lives to get the results that we're really looking for. I think so often we try to bite off too many things, right? I've seen
Mm.
people come out of seminars and, oh my gosh, as soon as they get home, 432 things in their life is going to be different, and they're going to start every morning different, and they're going to do this,
Seem
so on and so forth.
guilty of that as well.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, yeah,
it's a
in my early
recipe.
days.
It's a disaster. I have melded all of that into something that through my own lived experience works and that other people can apply it as well to do incremental change. It's really just about being the next best version of ourselves. And we just do that over and over again.
Mm. Next version of yourself. I love that.
The
Like,
next best version. Yeah.
next best version of yourself.
Mhm.
Amazing. Well, like you mentioned, you were a platinum partner for like 2 years. Were there any like key lessons you took away from that?
Oh gosh, that was probably when 2017 and 2018, maybe 2016, 2017. Loads. I mean, I learned a lot through that time period. Is there anything in particular that stands out? I don't know that I can think of anything in particular right now, but it was kind of like drinking from the fire hose, right? There was a lot of information. I walked on hot coals, right, in bare feet. I did it. So, there were moments like that where you just didn't, that would not be something that I would think that I would be able to do. But I was able to do it, as was the thousands of people that were at that. I think that might have been a date with destiny. But yeah, when you're a platinum partner, you have, access to Tony's platinum partner financial seminars. You have, a relationship trip. You have a spiritual trip. We went to India. So it's a lot of learning, and it's a great group of people, right? So it's a big community, but it's a lot of knowledge. But again, what do you do with that knowledge, right? So it's hard to know what to do with it really when you leave that environment. So I started practically applying things to my life, and I started very simple. Basically, I just got tired of being pissed off about 2 years after my marriage, right? And I first went to a coach who did some energetic healing and stuff. That was the start of my journey. And she had recommended the book, The Four Agreements. Have you read that?
I've heard it so many times, but I've not read. That's one I haven't read.
It's such a simple book, but it's so profound. So I took two concepts from that book, which is don't make assumptions. And oh gosh, I'm going to forget the second one here. Don't be offended. And it's amazing. So, and this is kind of what I'm talking about. When you take one thing, like don't make assumptions, that's a life changing practice because when you start being aware, right, you always have to have awareness before action. So when you start realizing how many times you are making assumptions about things, and I can give you an example. Let's say you're at the grocery store and the checkout lady's just really crappy, right? And we go, what's going on with her? What does she not like about me, right? A lot of times we turn those things back on ourselves. It has absolutely nothing to do with ourselves. It has to do with them. And, I'm sure that, for example, when my first son died, I was a miserable human being for quite some time. So I would not be too chipper with anybody at the grocery store. So you really learn those lessons that it's really all about you. It's not about somebody else. So when we start to be aware of those things, we really can begin to see how much control and influence they have over every moment of our lives. We usually remain unaware of that. So that's why I think awareness, lasting change really begins with awareness. Our choice and our personal agency and reclaiming our identity begins with awareness. It all begins with awareness and alignment.
Mm. Some very strong, powerful lessons there, like Stacie. I know you mentioned about your son and then your also your divorce as well. Um, how have you kind of like processed grief?
I didn't know much about the grief process when I first experienced, for example, the death of my son. And there is a very scientific, for lack of a better word, it's very well documented. The process of grief is very well documented. And there are books about it, and there are people that can help you get through grief as well. And I'm not going to remember, I'm not a grief coach, so I'm not going to remember all the 7 steps, but there's
Yeah.
denial and anger and, this and that. So for me, I think that when we let's say you're experiencing grief and you're not intimate with grief, you're intimate with the feeling, but you don't really know the process, so you don't have a context to it, right? So if you learn a little bit about it, it gives you more context and you can see that there are predictable phases to the grief process. Now, you could easily get stuck in one of those phases, and
Mm.
that's what you want to try to avoid, right? We want to move through it. We don't want to stay in it.
Yeah. Okay. So like working through it, like feeling it.
I'll give you another example from my life personally, and it is around when my son died. So, my doctor had suggested that I go to a group counseling session for parents that had lost children, children of all ages and for different reasons. My son was an infant. So I went to one of these sessions, and there was a gentleman there, and this was decades ago at this point, but I remember it still so profoundly.
Mm.
His wife, it had been 5 years since the death of their daughter, and his wife was still unable to go to the grocery store.
Wow.
And I have goosebumps just telling you that. And I could understand completely how she felt because I felt the same way at the time. But in my mind, I also knew that I didn't want to not be able to go to the grocery store for 5 years. I needed to get, and I had great support. I was married, my ex-husband at the time, my husband at the time, he supported me, my parents, so I had a good support network that encouraged me to get out back into the world, but it was very, very difficult. But I also the takeaway from that is I knew that I had to, because what's the choice? What's the other option? Not going to the grocery store or leaving the house for 5 years? I could understand that, but it didn't sound like something that I wanted to do. So I had to take the initiative and move through that and get myself back out into the world.
So moving through it. I know a lot of people can be like stuck in grief and it goes on for a while. Was there like a support group you found or anything like that?
When my child died, my doctor recommended one for me.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And then now I find my own support or my own coaches or, what have you. I've worked with a number of people over the years, and then I work with people as well. So
oh wow. And how old was your child?
he was in the neonatal intensive care for a month. He never made it home. He actually died in open heart surgery.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then again, so, change your story, change your life.
Mm,
And I can talk about this easily now because it was so long ago, but
mm,
I'll give you another perspective on that. So, when I left that counseling session in the weeks that followed, I was like, gosh. So a lot of these parents had lost children that were 8, 9, 10, or 14 years old or what have you.
mm,
So for me, I was like, okay, this is me rationalizing it, but it worked for me, right? Because it was a positive rationalization. And I thought, all right, maybe it's going to be a little bit easier for me because I don't have all these years of memories with the child, right? He had never been home. So I didn't have memories of him at the Christmas tree or,
mm.
sitting in his high chair in the kitchen. I didn't have all those memories. And for a split second, I thought, "Oh, but I was robbed of all those memories." And then I was like, no, Stacie, we're not. That is a way to think about it, but that's not the way I chose to think about it because it was not a healthy way for me to think about it, right? It was easier for me to adjust saying, okay, I don't have all of those memories in this house, and that's gonna work in my favor to help me heal. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like you were just reflecting on what happened a little bit. How can someone develop self-awareness, do you think, Stacey? Like, I know a lot of people go through life, they're like round, 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 and you've had a fair few experiences in your life. I know you help a lot of people. How can someone help their self-awareness?
Well, I think first of all, we need to learn what it is, right? Somebody needs to learn what it is and what it means. I think we need to learn to be quiet, as we talked about a little bit earlier. But it's really a skill and it's a habit, and we have to look at ourselves and have conversations with ourselves out of curiosity rather than judgment, right? So self-awareness can help. It doesn't weaken you, it steadies you, especially as you open up and begin to understand yourself better and better. And also just understand what's normal for being a human being,
Mm,
right? understanding that human beings resist change, that we are wired that way, and we're wired that way for reasons, right, over years and years of evolution. So, understanding that we naturally resist change can help us step into change a little more easily.
Mm,
Right? If we don't realize that resistance to change is a protective mechanism to keep us in a situation that we know, right? It keep us in the status quo. Even if we're not happy in that
mm,
status quo, we're safer there because we know what to expect. Understanding can help you step out of that and say, okay, this is just a natural human reaction. The situation that I am in is not helping me. It is not healthy for me. And I need to figure out how I can create a positive change. And whether that's getting counseling, a coach, reading a book, going to a seminar, there are so many resources available to us now. But it has to come from within. It really has to come from within. Alcoholic doesn't quit drinking until they decide they're going to quit drinking, generally. It doesn't matter how many people try to intervene or interrupt that habit. So our thinking and our actions are habitual as well. So get acquainted with them, figure them out, and then you can maneuver and adjust them to create the experience that you would rather be experiencing in life.
mm. I love that. Just that awareness piece on site on yourself. Stacey, I'd love to know, like, is there anything that you find really helpful in your routine to kind of prime you for your day or kind of like help you work through things?
If I need to work through things, I'm dealing with a vision issue right now, which is one reason why I'm not at my home in Florida and I'm here in Virginia. So, and it's life-changing. It's affecting my ability to drive and I've always been a very independent person, and the doctors in Florida said we can't help you anymore. So I said, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I contacted Johns Hopkins here in Baltimore, which has an eye institute. And so, what do I do with that? So I'm taking positive action about it. I'm educating myself about it. I don't want to say surrendering to it because I'm not giving up, right? But I don't know what the final outcome is going to be. But I'm easing into it and I am greeting it and I am thinking, you know, that it will resolve itself somehow. It's gonna resolve itself somehow, some way, whether I can drive, whether I'm comfortable driving on the interstate again or not, right? So, it's a big life change. It overwhelms me a little bit. It normally does not, and people that are around me and close to me can tell you that. They're like, "Oh my god, how can you be so upbeat about all of this?" It doesn't do me any good to be in despair. Right? But I can tell you, like, last Sunday, I felt a little bit defeated. I was like, "Oh my gosh,
Mm,
this might just be the best that they can do, with my vision at the moment." And so lean into that emotion a little bit, right? If you need to have a little cry, have a little cry. Sit down, find some quiet time. Give yourself some love, give yourself a hug. And that's pretty much how I deal with things at this point. You have to honor your emotions. It's very important to not dismiss your emotions, but to honor them. And when you need to do that, set aside some time to do that. And then move on about your day. I mean, that's really to the point. That's the point that I have managed in the last, oh gosh, 13 years maybe of practicing what I practice and what I teach is releasing worry. And I used to be a big worrier years and years ago. I worried a lot, but I've learned to release it and kind of take things as they come and be in the present moment. That's also very important. Be in the present moment.
mm.
I'm not lamenting about the past. I'm thinking, wow, it's a good thing I did a lot of things and lived out loud when I was younger, right? Because those are not things, I probably not gonna ever be able to go scuba diving again. So it's a good thing I did it before, but I don't sit in a mindset of, "Oh my god, I'm never gonna be able to do that." I root myself in joy of having done it and having all those experiences. I center myself in the present moment while I'm still planning the future as best I can, but not worrying about it.
I love that, Stacey. Such a good like perspective and
looking at things and the way you're seeing things. So yeah, Stacie, I'd love to know, as we like wrap up today, where the listener can find you, in
Yes.
terms of like reaching out, getting your support. I know you offering a ton of resources, a ton of like service to the world where they can find you. And if there's maybe any final words you'd like to share with us today.
Yeah, of course. My website, modernconsciousness.com, has everything about me. It has my programs. There are some free resources on there as well. And that's the final word I think I'm going to share with you, because I truly believe that if there is only one thing you could change about your life, it would be to calm your emotional triggers. Calm your triggers, calm your life. It is absolutely life changing. And I have a free resource on my website under programs called Navigating Your Emotional Triggers. And it's just a little workbook to help you unravel what they are. And I call them waypoints on our treasure map to joy, right? Why give your power away to somebody else? Because when we react, it's our reaction.
Mhm.
It's not anybody else's. So when we can reclaim our power, it's life changing, and you can find that on my website.
Oh, amazing, Stacie. So you can find Stacie's resources and links, including very generous amount of value she's offering, in the show notes below. So once again, Stacie, a massive thank you for coming on today.
Johnny, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. So that concludes today's episode. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.